If a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, if a podcast interview is recorded and nobody hears about it, is it really an interview? Does it make an impact? Today, we're going to talk about how to promote your podcast interview as a guest so that you can maximize your reach. And talk about maximizing, I want to introduce you to two podcasts that had such a reach, one spun off the other.
Hey, this is Joe Saucy, host of both the Stacking Benjamins and Money with Friends podcast, and you're listening to Podcast Guest Profits, hosted by my friend Tom Schwab and sponsored by Interview Valet.
Today, we're going to be talking about promoting your podcast interview. And I know some people will say, well, that's why I'm a guest. That way I don't have to promote it. The host does all of that. And I would say you're missing a huge opportunity. If you've got this event, why wouldn't you promote that every place you could and every time you could? So let's talk about first the time to promote it. A lot of people will wait till it goes live. I'm like, no, if I'm invited on a great podcast, I'm going to start talking about that and promoting it before it even goes out. So the time to do it is before. So even when you're getting ready to do the podcast interview, you could tweet out, you could put out on Facebook, I am so excited to talk with Joe Saucy on the Stacking Benjamins podcast, right? So now you're telling people, wow, I was invited on this. Check this out. Maybe they'll start looking at that. Then after the interview, it's a great way to give a thank you, to give a shout out to the host and say, hey, I had a great interview with Joe Saucy on the Stacking Benjamins podcast. Look for it to come out on this date when they tell you. So all of a sudden you're building that up. Now, of course, when it goes live, everybody wants to promote it then, right? But remember, this is evergreen content. This is going to be out there for a while. There's a long tail to it. The statistics show that 80% of the listenerships of a podcast is within the first 30 days of it launching. That being said, at times you'll see spikes and the host will talk about your podcast. Something will come up with it. It could be a holiday when people are going back and binging old podcasts, and you'll see the listenership of your podcast go up. We've had clients now that are out over 4 years that still get traffic, leads, and customers from podcasts that are 4 years old. I don't know if this is evergreen, if it'll keep producing for decades, but I know podcast interviews are at least as good as a can of soup and last 3 to 5 years. So don't forget, even though it may be old to you, continue to promote that podcast. You can go back and continually promote that. I've been on over 1,200 podcast interviews, and I've got an entire list, a database of those, and I'll continue to go back and promote those months and years afterwards. So that's when to do it, and that's always. The next one is where to do it. Now, the obvious thing is, well, I'll put it up on social media, and I think that's great. And when you do that, make sure that you tag the host and tag the show, right? We're all vain and we all listen for our names. So when you do that, you're exposing your audience to the host's audience and vice versa. Also, if you're doing that months after the podcast goes live, that's a great show that you're still interested in. Maybe it'll cause them to talk more about it. Tell you what, it will get you invited on more podcast interviews. If people go to your social media and see that you as a guest are promoting it also, they're more likely to bring you on the show. So social media, that's the obvious one. But how about your email? You know, there's a lot of people that don't listen to podcasts, but will listen to read emails. So maybe put a synopsis of it in the next email that goes out. Maybe put a summary of it and a PS that, hey, I just had the honor of being on Stacking Benjamins podcast with Joe Saucy. Check out the episode here. Great way to expose people to that. Another one is on your website, right? It used to be that you'd have trust seals on your website, as seen on this television show, as seen in this newspaper. Well, now podcasts are the new hot media. So make sure you put those logos from the podcast interviews up on your website. What a great trust seal to have those interviews scrolling across your website. It really shows that you are an expert. You are an in-demand guest. I've also seen people put up separate pages on their website, and it'll be media, and it might be podcast interviews, and they'll put links to every one of their podcast interviews there. If you're wondering if somebody is an expert and you look and you see, wow, they've been interviewed on tons of podcast interviews, that's a great trust seal, a great credibility or a proof source there. The next thing, and we're going to talk about this in our next episode of Podcast Guest Profits Tip of the Day, is to repurpose the content, right? You could mention it and promote it in your blog, in your LinkedIn articles, from stages, from YouTube. There's so many ways. All I would do is encourage you. After you invest the 30 to 45 minutes in an interview, don't think that the process is over. You've already found gold, right? So make sure that you let everyone know about that. Make sure that you get as much out of it. You've invested your time, you've invested your money. Now make sure that it works for you for months and years to come. It's something that you can do, something you can have your team do. It's something you can farm out, but as a great way to make the most out of every podcast interview, to get the maximum return on investment that we talk about of your time and your money. Make sure you promote every podcast interview to maximize your reach.
Has obscurity become your biggest problem? Stages have disappeared. Conferences are canceled. In-person meetings seem like a distant memory. Your prospective customers still need you. They still need to hear from you. Stop trying to break through the noise. It's not working. Get in on the conversation. Get featured as the expert guest on targeted podcast interviews. Podcasts are hot. Listenership is up 20% in 2020. Podcasts are the new digital stage. Leverage other people's established platform as a featured guest. Since 2015, Interview Valet has helped over 500 leading brands get featured on over 20,000 podcast episodes. You're the guest. We take care of the rest. Stop being the best kept secret. Find out how we can help you leverage targeted podcast interviews to get heard, to grow your brand, to grow your sales, to be recognized as the market leader.